بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Welcome to another episode. So when I moved to Chicago from the UK, I was around the age of 8. And when I first moved, one of the first things that my mom started looking for was an Islamic school and a local masjid. And when we found one of the first things that I came across was a flyer of somebody teaching Qur'an class. And so instantly my mom signed me up and I enrolled in this Qur'an class. And the imam there at the time was, I think he had just started teaching Qur'an there, and I think he was just hired there as the imam. And I was one of the first students, and I was with him for so long. And alhamdulillah, he carried me all the way from the Arabic alphabet to memorizing some chapters from the Quran. But I also remember somebody else who was in that class too that was much older. I was also doing hifz at the time. And I found out that was actually my Quran teacher's son. And lo and behold, that person with us today is our guest, Dr. Fahad Khan. Many years later, now it turns out he's a guest on our podcast. So we're honored to have him. So assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. We're excited about this conversation. It's a hot topic, but we're really excited to dive in. So a quick background. Dr. Fahad Khan is an academic researcher, a clinical psychologist specializing in the integration of faith and mental wellness through the field of Islamic psychology. His professional work is dedicated to advancing mental health within Muslim communities. He has served as the deputy director at Khalil Center, the largest provider of Muslim mental health services in the West, where he supervised clinical and research work. His background also includes teaching at various academic institutions in the United States. He is a fellow of the International Association of Islamic Psychology and actively contributes to the field by serving on the editorial boards of several peer-reviewed journals.
MashaAllah.
MashaAllah.
So I know you, Zayd, but who's your co-host? I don't have any introduction to her.
Yeah, we missed that part. So, Assalamu alaikum. I'm Hiba. I'm his wife and the co-host of Diary of a Matchmaker, co-founder of Halal Match. And
Yes.
alhamdulillah, we enjoy doing this work so much together.
Yes. Thanks for jumping in. So the topic itself, well, let's talk about searching for a spouse. We know, especially here in the West, I don't know what the situation is much like in the Middle East, but in the West, the search has become more and more difficult over the years, trying to find a spouse. And I feel, it's just my assumption, that as a result, pornography has also risen in the Muslim community. Do you feel like there is a correlation there, or is this problem being discussed in Muslim circles? And if not, then why?
Yeah, so Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, assalamu alaikum again. I just want to, I think it's important to preface the issue here. The issue is more complex and probably larger than just pornography or issue of getting married. Because, like you were saying, it has become difficult to get married, which contributes to pornography consumption. But pornography consumption also contributes to difficulties in getting married or even desire to get married. I think the world that we kind of live in now, as compared to the world before, there are certain things that have changed, certain factors that contribute to all of these issues that we're just addressing right now, including these two especially. So, for example, we're living in a very materialistic, consumeristic world where fulfilling your desires, subjective feelings, it's called the post-truth era because everyone has their own truth. This postmodern world where there are no clear objective definitions anymore. Everyone has their own definition, right? What's healthy, what's unhealthy, what's good, what's bad. My good can be your bad and vice versa. This is obviously against the values of Islam. But what that has done, or one of the byproducts of this world that we live in, is that, we're just used to pleasing, to making ourselves happy, whatever that takes, right? And so now this has to do with pornography because, pornography consumption has to do with obviously pleasure and dopamine release. And I think we'll probably talk about it a little bit later. But on the other hand, marriage is difficult. Marriage requires work. I mean, you've been married for a while. I've been married for 16 years now. So we know that it's not easy. And there are times in our relationship where things get very challenging. So I think that's where the issue comes up, is that in this day and age, people don't want to put in the effort. So that also leads to people not wanting to get married. And pornography becomes this way to kind of deal with the loneliness the person might feel, the sadness they might feel, just to get some quick dopamine fix that they need. We don't talk about it because I think for many reasons. One, primarily because it's a personal issue, right? It's a private matter. Like when we do marital counseling with Muslims, it's difficult to discuss intimacy issues, which is a very huge contributor to marital problems. But why? Because it's a personal matter. Like, it's difficult. Not that we shouldn't talk about it, but I think that's a one reason why we don't talk about it. And the other is because it brings a lot of shame to people. It's easier for someone to talk about their smoking cigarettes, for example, than like pornography addiction, right? Yeah. So that's probably why we don't talk about it.
Okay. How common is pornography consumption in the Muslim community?
So I think if we define it, like if we're talking about looking at pornography, which almost has become a norm. So any TV show, every TV show pretty much, things on like social media, TikTok, I mean, there's pornographic material there, right? Because again, like we're looking at from the lens of Muslims, right? For us, it's not just like people who are not wearing clothes or who are engaged in sexual acts. I mean, like anything that's beyond what we're allowed to look at, like it becomes an area of haram for us. And there's a reason, because Islam has rules that are supposed to prevent people from getting to the bigger sins here, right? In this case, zina. So anything beyond, like I said, if I'm looking at a photo of a woman, even with any kind of like lustful thoughts or underlying drives, then I think that becomes a problem. So I think everyone engages in that, probably on a regular daily basis, multiple times a day. Mm-hmm. Then you have like pornography that's becomes part of TV shows. Like, the most popular TV shows in the last like 15 years was Game of Thrones, right? So it had heavy pornographic material. That's one of the reasons why I didn't like the show. Violence and pornography, it almost normalized it, right? So and then people justify like, oh, this is why, and it's a good show, whatever the reason might be. So we've become desensitized to even that type of material. And then we have people who deliberately, intentionally, and those are the people that you're probably referring more to. They go in and they look at pornography, or they spend hours upon hours. So in our clinical work, I think nearly everyone, I mean, I would say like a vast majority, like I would say at least, if I don't have the exact numbers, but I would say probably 60 to 70% of people do look at pornography intentionally. Obviously the number is high with certain population, right? So like people who are depressed, people who are more lonely, the younger ones, who may have more exposure to things that kind of drives them to do that.
Wow. So, and if we want to exclusively talk about addiction, porn addiction, are there like any studies about how common it is in the Muslim community?
Not that I'm aware of, but I can tell you it's pretty common. I think it is common. And the other thing, again, it's we have to recognize that because all of us have some form of addictions, right? So like, yes, pornography is probably worse than someone who's addicted to social media, right? Just consumption or just having your phone. Like there's addiction to that as well. Some people are addiction to drinking coffee, right? Like there's different forms of addiction. I think at the core level, if we look at our human psyche and what makes us human, every addiction is bad because you're feeding the nafs. But obviously pornography has other repercussions as well. So, I don't want to normalize pornography, but I also want to recognize that addictions in general are bad for us as humans and as those who are supposed to be the representatives of Allah on this earth.
Yeah, I was just telling Zaid before the interview that like a thought that goes into any single woman's mind when she's searching, and even men, but I think more for women, is the person I'm talking to addicted to porn? How can I tell? How can I, like, are there red flags? Are there like signs to look for?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think, you do this professionally, like for a living. When you're searching for someone to get married to, this is a process that requires a lot of seriousness and maturity, right? This isn't like dating. I think we've kind of, I would say, confused, like marriage or searching for a spouse to dating. Because in dating, in an American culture, Western culture, you're just kind of fooling around. You just have someone and, maybe they make you feel good and you enjoy each other's company and that's it. Like, there's no commitment there. It's not, with like this commitment you have to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And so when we search for a potential marital spouse, an individual that we want to commit to, that's a very serious process. So as part of the conversation, I think there has to be conversation about pornography, right? Now, a lot of people come to me and ask me, like, if someone is addicted to pornography or looks at pornography, not even addicted to, because addiction requires like some level of commitment, and if you can't stay away from it, and it's not easy to determine that with pornography. But if they look at pornography, what should I do? Should I marry them or not? My answer usually is that you have to find out what they're doing about it. Right. So if someone is, for example, let's look at someone who's struggling with weight, right? They're overeating or they can't lose weight. If they're going to the gym every week, they're trying, but they're still maybe struggling every day. That's a better person than someone who just says, I don't care, whatever, right? That mindset is unhealthy mindset. So someone who looks at pornography, knows that it's haram, doesn't like it, works on it constantly, is in the process and in this, and doing this jihad of their nafs. That person is a very noble individual in my eyes, even though they're committing that sin every single day. But if someone is like, so what? What's the big deal? It's the same thing about Game of Thrones. There's people who are like, so what's the big deal? It's a TV show. It's fun. And well, no, it's not that. Like, you have to take it seriously. That's a very serious offense and issue. So if someone has that kind of mindset, that's more dangerous than someone who looks at it but still works on themselves.
Yeah, I feel like this, whether it's an addiction or somebody who's just watching it, it's one of those subtle things that you can't really determine, because to an extent it doesn't really, or maybe I could be wrong about this, it doesn't impact your way to function in society, right? Like, people have jobs and they go about their normal lives, but it's one of those things where it's hidden. And I come across stories all the time where sometimes, like, the wife would find out because she would just randomly go through her husband's search browser or something like that, right? So it's really hard to determine whether you're going through the courting phase or even if you're married, to tell, is this person consuming porn, are they not? So are there some, aside from just asking questions, are there other ways to kind of uncover this or determine that?
No, like you said, it's really hard because it's oftentimes something even the individual is engaging in. Because if you think about it, like some of the addictions, for example, if someone is addicted to using drugs, for example, right? They'll, like if they're smoking marijuana, they'll smoke marijuana in their car, they'll smoke marijuana in their house, in their room, in the garage, wherever. But if someone is addicted to pornography, oftentimes they are doing it in closed rooms, in dark places, because there's a sense of shame. They're even hiding it from themselves because of the immense amount of shame that it brings to these individuals, the guilt that they feel. So it's not something that people are usually aware. So the symptoms are not really, you can't look at someone and say, oh, that person is addicted to pornography. That's not easy to determine. You might look at someone who, is high, and you can tell, oh, this person is looks like he's high the way he's talking, or, looking at maybe their pupils are constricted, so they might be on stimulants or something. You can kind of see some signs and symptoms, but pornography is not really visible. It's not something you can determine. That's why the conversation is really important. And that's why the maturity has to be there too. Because let's face it, we all know this is a common problem. If a person isn't ready to admit, at least say, hey, I do struggle with it. No one's going to outright come and say, I have a addiction to it. But if you're having the conversation, they say, yes, I struggle with it, and I'm working on it. I need to work on it. I think that shows sign of maturity, right? So if the person doesn't say it, if anyone listening to this, watching this, is struggling with pornography, if you can't express the problem to someone that you're about to marry, then there's a bigger issue here. Then you don't have the maturity to own, because eventually they'll find out. This is something that you can't keep hidden for long, especially if you're living with someone 24 hours a day.
Yeah, yeah. It makes sense. The problem is that sometimes the attitude towards this problem is that I'll stop once I get married. And from your experience, does marriage actually solve the problem, or can it make it worse? And how is that situation dealt with?
Yeah. So the thing is, okay, just kind of taking a step back. Whenever we take some factor, some event, something into consideration, there are things that are associated with it, factors that may contribute to it, and there are things that have a direct relationship with it. Right. So, for example, just because someone is single doesn't mean they're going to be looking at pornography or they have the justification to do so. However, being a single is a factor. right? Because they don't have a halal way to, be intimate with someone. And after they've reached the age of maturity, there's a physiological drive that's there, right? So that does contribute to this problem of pornography. Similarly, just because someone has pornography addiction doesn't mean they should get married, and that's going to be the solution to it. But it can be a factor that helps them. You see what I'm saying? So, certainly, like when I work with individuals who had pornography addiction and they were married, or they got married and their spouse found out, we kind of talked about what role does intimacy play. Having a spouse on board saying that, this person's married to me, it's their haq, to have intimacy with me, and perhaps they're struggling, and if they have certain times that they have urges and I can make myself available, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I think people, when people talk about this, they have this thing about, oh, well, it's not my problem. No, when you get married, it's our problem, whether you like it or not. I mean, it is going to affect you, right? You can try to back out of it, but there's no way out of it. So if you say like it's our problem, let's see what we can do as a team. Okay, what can I do for my wife or my husband who's struggling with this? If I can make myself available, I've seen those people recover better. They have a much healthier relationship. They're able to overcome this issue because they have their spouse that's on board. So I'm saying that because being married can be helpful, but that doesn't mean that, if it's a severe problem, you're struggling with it, you have no control over it, that you think when you get married, it's going to go away. That doesn't usually happen.
I'm glad you mentioned when you said, what can I do for my husband? What can I do for my wife? Now, when we think about pornography addiction, we immediately think of men, but I'm sure it also affects women. But does it affect women differently than men, or just the same pattern?
So on a like a broader level, any addiction, especially pornography addiction in this case, affects the reward pathway in your brain, right? Because you get this like hit of dopamine. Now that has a larger effect on your life in general. For example, people become more impulsive. The ability to think about consequences, postpone, delay gratification, right? These are issues that come about as a result of pornography. That impulsive behavior, because people can't control themselves, also leads to emotional problems, right? They get angered easily, frustrated easily, for example. They can't find things pleasurable in life, right? Things that normally otherwise they enjoyed, or normal people would enjoy, people who don't have any kind of addictions. For these individuals, their brain is so used to getting that hit. I mean, imagine if you're used to eating good food every day, right? You're eating restaurant style food. Then you don't like your home cooked food, right? Like your mom's dal or whatever beans they don't give you that same kick, because that's how it is, right? But normal people, that's not normal, right? Most people would be eating home every day or most of the days, and maybe occasionally you might eat out, right? Indulge. So the system is kind of like hijacked in that manner. So that affects both men and women, right? I don't think there's any difference when it comes to those type of effects. And the other thing with pornography is that its effects on intimacy. So if you're married, for example, or when you do get married, the ideas that you have about intimacy, the things that would otherwise be normal for individuals to feel pleasure from, you no longer feel that pleasure. Right. So that, again, your sensitivity or your need for that dopamine or whatever it is that, it increases. So it ends up affecting your physical intimacy with your spouse.
SubhanAllah, if you want to think about it Islamically, from an Islamic point of view, it's like when you sought something that's against Allah's command, then Allah robbed you the ability to enjoy what was permissible and what's halal. Is this right, or am I exaggerating?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, if we look at let's look at human ontologies, human beings, who we are, right, as human beings. So we exist in this dunya. As part of our existence in this dunya, we have, for lack of better words, animalistic qualities to us, right? Mm-hmm. So we have the need for sleeping, eating, pleasure. There's aggression in us, right? So Imam Ghazali will talk about the four categories of qualities, characteristics that people have. So there's angelic qualities, there's satanic qualities, and then there's animalistic qualities. One of those animals that engage in grazing and eating, sleeping, sexual desire. Then there's aggressive animals, right, who are trying to overcome the lions and tigers, things like that. So all that exists as part of who we are in this dunya, right? And that's where shaitan comes in and knows these weaknesses and tempts us, right, with a lot of different things. So part of being a human, part of being a Muslim, is that we recognize that. I live in this dunya. I have these struggles will always be there. This is part of who I am. That's why when we discuss the nafs, we know that the nafs, person can have control over their nafs, but it is not something you maintain forever. Your nafs can change, sometimes multiple times a day or moment to moment. One moment you have full control, the other moment you have lost your control. There's a story of like a Sufi sheikh who was walking and then he saw someone on the street, someone who was engaged in sinning. I think he was maybe drinking or something. And, and he has this dialogue with him. And the person says to the sheikh, he says, if can I be like you? Right? Like meaning you're so honored and this righteous individual who's a sheikh. And he says, yes, in the blink of an eye, if Allah wills it. Right? And then he says, well, can you be like me? And he said, yes, if Allah wills in the blink of an eye. Right? Meaning our nafs can change moment to moment. Right? We can go from being the most pious to being a sinner and then back to the being pious again. So that's how we are created. That's part of our existence and part of our jihad. And this is what I mentioned earlier. Jihad. This is called the great jihad, right? This is more difficult than the physical jihad, that the people engage in. Is that we have that self-control and we're able to monitor and tame our nafs and to use it for things that are beneficial, things that are righteous, and that's fulfilling our destiny and that's fulfilling our oath with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala.
Beautiful.
Sometimes, I was going to say that, of course, not everybody is at the stage where they're ready to get married and to channel their natural desires. And so sometimes the attitude that comes into mind is, well, it's a lesser of the two evils. At least I'm not committing zina, right? And it's better I do this than I go commit zina. What's your response to that and about how to properly reframe somebody's mindset around that?
Yeah, in psychology, we call that rationalization, right? So the thing we have to recognize is that, for example, when the Qur'an is mentioning zina, it says, La taqrabu zina, right? Don't even come near zina, right? Because the idea is not don't commit zina. Obviously, anyone even people who are not Muslim, will agree that zina is bad, right? Especially within the context of marriage, right? Cheating on your spouse is bad. Having an affair with someone is bad. But the thing is that usually people don't go from being righteous and being clean to then committing zina. That there's a lot of steps that are in between, right? We know the famous story of the person in Bani Israel who ended up committing zina. Then there's a whole hadith about this.
Yeah.
So it's subtle ways that we move closer and closer and closer to zina until then it happens, and this is on that path basically. Right. So when you look at pornography, you're going down the path. Imagine, for example, like growing up, I don't know how children how they're doing it now. It's really tough for them. But when we were growing up, for us, pornography access was really like not available. Like it wasn't there. Like I grew up in Pakistan, there was no pornography that I'm aware of that I could access immediately. Right. Even like things in the market and stuff, none of this was available. Then when I moved to America, when the internet became more popular, the internet was like a way to, get that access. So for me growing up, like even watching people hold hand or kiss was like, oh my God, this is shameful, right? So we have this fitra inside of us that recognizes something that is just not like healthy. There's some level of disgust in it, like public affection, for example. Looking at someone who's supposed to be covered naked, right? Like there's something about it that just feels wrong. So I'm saying if it goes against the fitra, it shouldn't be done. Even if you're thinking, okay, it's lesser of the two evil or whatever, it's preventing you from that. Now, what the other thing that happens is if you keep doing it, if you keep justifying it, this is where shaitan is like kind of like training you, then that becomes the norm. Then moving one step forward isn't going to be, you might say, okay, well, at least I'm not committing zina, but hey, I'm talking to a woman. Hey, at least I'm not committing zina, I'm just hanging out with her. Like it just starts getting closer and closer to the ultimate thing until that happens. And then, unfortunately, it's hard to come back from that.
It's a slippery slope, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What kind of unrealistic expectations does porn addiction create in terms of like pleasure, intimacy, bodies, and how can that show up in marriage later?
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue is that not just like intimacy, but even relationships that we see in movies, media are just kind of like portrayed in a way that's unrealistic, right? Even like social media, we see that there are a lot of couples who have like these TikTok accounts, and then you think that they're doing so great, and then you find out that people are getting divorced.
Yeah.
And so same with intimacy, right? The way it's portrayed, it's just a show, like in pornography. They're putting on a show for entertainment purpose, and it's far from the reality. I think any person who's married, who's been intimate, can tell anyone like this is not like a secret that the intimacy isn't as pleasurable as it's shown in pornography. So I think that's the part that really messes it up. The other thing is intimacy, physical intimacy is one way that you feel connected with your spouse. It's a very important way. It's a very basic physiological way, right? Like it's a need that everyone has, and it gets fulfilled by your spouse. So you feel this kind of like closeness, attachment with your spouse, right? When that need is messed up. So for example, imagine, I used the example earlier of like, eating home cooked meals. Imagine if you're, if you think that your mother is feeding you and not feeding you a good meal, like purposefully, right? That is going to mess up how you look at her. It's going to destroy the way that she is represented in your heart, in your mind. Similarly with spouse, once you don't feel fulfilled because you're used to pornography, then you start thinking that, oh, maybe she doesn't love me. Maybe there's no love there. You don't feel that attachment, that closeness anymore with the individual. So it really begins to affect that relationship between the spouse. It becomes a source of argument and fights because you don't feel fulfilled, right? That normal, healthy, intimacy, it doesn't feel fulfilling anymore. And so then there's a frustration that gets built up. And then, like I said before, if you're used to having a high like dopamine spike all the time, then when you don't get it, it also affects you. Not to mention that it also leads to like erectile dysfunction and premature ejaculation, a lot of physical problems in intimacy that also then makes it difficult to be intimate and then causes more frustration and more problems.
Wow, this is so deep. I guess like it's more than just the surface physical effect. It's more than that, way more than that.
Yeah. Also, I think it's worth adding to that sometimes pornography, like what you see in pornography is this idealized version of a person, right? And then there's the expectation that your spouse has to meet that idealized version of whatever you're seeing on your phone or whatever. So there is that factor also that really also impacts the marriage later on, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Like it creates this idea in your mind that this is how my marriage is going to be, this is how intimacy is going to be. And then you go in with that expectation. And then, from the very first day, you're disappointed because that's not how it is. Right. Yeah. So then, then obviously it's frustration. Then you're just like, why not? And then you're so used to it because you're, through the exposure that you've had, then anything else doesn't seem normal. And then people start thinking that maybe if it was someone else, I would be in a, maybe a healthier, intimate relationship. And I've seen people where, for example, couples where one of them might struggle with intimacy because of other reasons, like maybe just low libido, whatnot. From even that person has a frustrated partner, frustrated husband or wife. And then on the other hand, someone who has a very healthy libido, and their husband or wife might still be frustrated because of the pornography issue, right? Because they think that their spouse needs to be more active. But it's like, wait, I mean, they are as active as you would expect any healthy individual to be.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm interested to know the physiological differences. So if we were, for example, to take two brains, one brain of a person who has consumed porn for over a decade and another brain that has not, what physiological differences would we see?
Yeah, so I mentioned the pathway that for rewards, right? So we have like a pleasure center in our brain, like the neurotransmitter dopamine is what gets released. So anytime you do something pleasurable, whether it's like eating a plate of biryani or enjoying video game or even hanging out with someone that you might enjoy, and then to obviously there's intimacy, sexual pleasure, pornography, all of these things. So ideally what happens is that you engage in something pleasurable, your dopamine goes up, and then it has to come down, right? And that coming down, the higher the peak is, the longer the come down is, right? This is why right after that period, when especially for men, when they reach the peak of it, the orgasm, right afterwards, that drop, there's this kind of like, it's almost like the opposing effect. Whatever is bringing them pleasure, they just don't want to engage in it anymore, right? And wives will oftentimes have a complaint about that, like, when he's done, it's like he's not interested anymore. That's just a physiological thing that ends up happening. So, but that's our brain's way of resetting. In fact, if you look at the chart, it kind of goes down to a base level, but it goes even below that because it's resetting, it's balancing. It's not normal for the brain to keep getting dopamine. I remember there was a study I think I read about in mice. They did this study where they gave, every time the mice pressed a lever, it would give the mouse dopamine, right, in their brain. They would feel good. And they kept doing it to the point where I think they killed themselves or died because of the amount of dopamine. They kept wanting more and more and more, right? So brain needs to reset, otherwise it's damaging your brain, right? So I think that's the part that ends up, because if you keep engaging in this, and those people who are struggling with pornography, I mean, I've worked with so many of these individuals. It starts out very slow, occasionally, then to like every day, and then to some. I've seen some people who like 3-4 hours a day they look at pornography every single day. Right now, that's the other extreme of it. Obviously, there are not too many people that are there, alhamdulillah. But the thing is that it could get to that point because now for your brain it's not enough, and when it's coming down, the dopamine levels in your brain, that part is like, it's the opposite of feeling happy and good, right? So that part, if the brain is used to this spike, it turns into depression. And so then pornography or anything pleasurable becomes a way to cope with that depressive state, because you no longer want to feel that depression. It's unbearable for the individual to feel that depression. So it becomes like this perpetual cycle where now you're just trying to compensate for the effects of the pornography, the effects of it, physiological. There's a really good book. It's called Dopamine Nation. I think Anna Lemke is her name, the author who wrote it. But she explained this whole physiological, system in the brain really well. And I recommend people to read that.
And this is true for any type of addiction?
Basically, but the in terms of like categories of things that bring us pleasure, sexual pleasure is at the top of it.
Okay. I wanted to ask about how to overcome it. Some people think that willpower, or even other people think that just spirituality is enough to overcome it. Is that true?
So I think you need a multi-pronged approach, right? What makes us like humans? We talked about the nafs, right? So we have this nafs, and at the very core, it seeks to please itself, be comfortable like an animal, but it can be tamed and trained. Like you have to do mujahada and mukhalaf of the nafs, right? Then we also have within us like our system of thinking, aql, cognition, right? So the ability to think about things, recognize triggers, patterns, monitor yourself, think about consequences of the behaviors. So that's there. Then we also have emotions, right? Ihsas, like some of them are very deep-rooted emotions. So what am I feeling right now? I'm feeling sad, I'm happy, I'm anxious, I'm feeling guilt. Is it healthy guilt? Is it unhealthy guilt? All that is emotion. And then we have the ruh as well. Now, these things are not separated. They're kind of like, layers, you can say, but they all are intertwined. They're all working together. So when in this system, there's a problem, even if the problem is a nafsani problem, in this case, pornography, one can argue this is mostly a nafsani problem, but it does affect other parts. So for example, if someone wants to engage in pornography, I mentioned earlier, they rationalize that they're using the aql to justify what they're doing, right? And then the same person can also use the aql to talk themselves out of the behavior, right? So there's a connection between aql and the nafs. Then if you look at from the perspective of emotions, I mentioned people who are depressed, for example. They engage in pornography to feel happy. There's a connection there. Ruhani, obviously, the more you engage in it, the away you are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the vice versa is also correct, where the Qur'an mentions that inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. Like prayer is supposed to keep you away from these behaviors. So the more you engage with Allah, the more you engage with salah, a meaningful engagement, it'll protect you from the nafsani things as well. So because the problem is also it's complex, the solution, the fix also has to be a multi-pronged approach. You cannot just say, okay, I'm going to stay away from the behavior, or, it's not going to be sufficient. You have to be aware of your thoughts. You have to be aware of your emotions. You have to manage your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you don't have any deep, meaningful, and not to mention social connections, right? Social support. If you're isolated, you're more likely to engage in pornography. So you have to be engaged more with society, do things for other people, live a more productive life. There's all these things that you have to do. I'm working on a workbook right now, actually, on pornography addiction, but it'll take a couple of weeks for it to finish. But in that, I have chapters on each of these areas, like how to treat using your aql, your nafs, emotions, ihsas, ruh, because all of that requires it. But it has to be an approach that, and in every moment when the person is struggling, they're going to engage in all of these aspects of their psyche. Otherwise, it's not going to be efficient. There are few people who have that willpower, very few people who can say, I'm not going to do it, and they'll back away and they'll never touch it again. But those are far and few. Most of us are, normal human beings who go back and forth and struggle, and but that struggle is good, by the way. Sometimes people think like the road to recovery is not like a straight line, right? So you might take 2 steps forward, 1 back, and that's fine. You still make small and steady progress, right? So if you were able to keep away from pornography, let's say you're a daily consumer of pornography, and you keep away for even like 2 days, that's a progress. 1 day is progress. Then you increase it to 3 days and 4 days. You might think, okay, after 4 days, I'm still looking at pornography. Yes, but those 4 days you did not, right? So sometimes Shaitan comes in and says, no, you're still like that. And what's the point? Or some people, when they start to engage in it, they have this inner voice that tells them, don't do it. This is bad for you. But then they're like, oh, it's too late for me. Or they're engaging in it and they have this shame and guilt, and they're like, oh, now it's too late. I'm doomed anyway. I'm going to hell. What's the point? You have to be aware of these things, and you have to be able to use these things like healthy shame, healthy social connections, healthy support to be able to pull you out of this problem.
Yeah, the one thing I want to add to that is that while we're taking these practical steps, also at the end of the day, we have to channel our desires. We're human beings, and so it's also important that we are taking proactive steps to try to get married, so that we can eventually channel those desires. And that if we're just putting marriage as something that's far off, and we're just treating it as something that just happened one day, rather than taking proactive steps, then obviously we're going to constantly be dealing with these struggles and these desires, and not channeling it in an appropriate way. So when you talk about the multi-pronged approach, one of those prongs is getting ready for marriage. Just making sure that we're ready financially, emotionally, whatever it may be. So I just wanted to add that part.
Yeah. And earlier when we were talking about marriage, and someone asked about like pornography and if they should get married or not, one of the things that we're seeing now in this day and age is people are not getting married, right? That people, there's this fear, there's this like anxiety of marriage. A lot of people, even though they might not have pornography addiction, or they still don't want to get married. So I think we have to encourage marriage, right, from an early on. I think that's the part we need to work on, and we need to remove barriers to getting married, and that I think will also help in preventing some of these issues. But the thought that, like when you said being ready for marriage, right? Because sometimes it's even culturally, some people, like you might say financially, some people might say, oh, well, like you have to have this amount of money, right? In some cultures, I won't name, like when you go ask the girl's father, you have to like present a dowry, you have to have a certain amount, right? $25,000 and I'm thinking, who in the world has I don't have $25,000 to spare, right? Who has this money that's just sitting there and they're like, I'm going to go. And in this day and age, people can barely afford like their living expenses. Who's going to save $25,000 and what age? You see, like it makes it really hard to get married. When I got married, I was still in school, right? Alhamdulillah, I made it. I had my first son, and I didn't have a job. I was still in school, right? My second son was born on the same month actually that I graduated with my doctoral degree. That's when I first got my first job, right? So, but alhamdulillah, you make it. So I think getting ready for marriage is more of this mental process, maturity, finding the right person, the person who realizes that, hey, we're still struggling. We're going to have our issues, but we're going to work through it together. Having support from family and parents, I think that's really important. And we need to facilitate that. Like, I don't want to create it. I don't want to see barriers, because then we're fueling the problem of pornography in this case, by putting up barriers to getting married.
Yeah. Speaking of family support, so unfortunately, in a lot of cases, when the family discovers that a family member is struggling with porn addiction, they don't even see it as a struggle. They just immediately jump into, oh my God, this is so shameful. You're disgusting. Like, you brought shame into the family and all of that. So, and I assume that this just goes into feeding that guilt feeling, unhealthy guilt feeling. Let's say someone discovers that a family member is actually struggling through this. What is the right approach to go about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be some normal feelings that happen, right? Obviously, there's some reactionary feeling. Human beings, we tend to have reactions, right? Where that's just like the core of our emotions. Sometimes you get angry because something happened, someone hurt you, for example. So, if it's your spouse, for example, you might feel hurt by them, right? You might feel like, oh, how, I feel betrayed. Initially, those feelings are normal. In fact, these feelings will linger on for a little while. If it's your children or it's some family member, you might say it brought shame to the family. You might feel ashamed. Those initial feelings are there, but I think you have to kind of be able to dig and say, okay, this is a problem. It's not going to go away by itself. Let me see what I can do to offer. How much of criticism and shaming is going to be helpful here. Right. There's healthy shame and there's unhealthy shame. So, let's not utilize unhealthy shame because that's what's going to, push this individual into committing this even more. Let's keep it healthy. Okay, this is bad. It shouldn't have happened. But what can I do for you? Right? How can I help you? And make it our problem. Right? This is in the world that we live in. It's very easy to just point fingers and say this is their problem and his problem, her problem. No, it's our problem. Whether it's between the couples or in a household, what can we do to help? Like, for example, there was a teenager I worked with who struggled with pornography. And one of the things that he did was he told his parents about it, right? And so then they were able to help him. Yeah, this was very interesting. They were able to help him. They set up some systems where he didn't have his phone alone with him. Then they realized that he was close to like almost 18, 19 years of age. So they said, we're going to try to get him married early. So they told him, like, look, be patient and, we'll get you married early. So you have this, like, something to look forward to. But if the path to marriage is like, and this is a family problem, right? Sometimes families will say, oh, you have to make this amount of money. You have to be done with medical school and residency and that, the person's thinking, okay, that means for the next 10 years, I'm not going to get married. No one can delay their gratification for that long, right? Like that's not even possible. So, you have to be realistic and say, okay, when's the soonest we can get this person married? Right. And if the person's aware of it, that might make it easier for them to control themselves. But having that support from family, in this case, the parents, was actually very helpful. And the most successful cases that I've seen, especially married individuals, is where the spouse is in. It's like, okay, this is our problem. We're going to work on it together. And it's not like, oh, he is this way and she's that way, and pointing fingers at one another.
Well, this reminds me of the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, so إذا جاءكم من ترضونه دينه وخلقه فزوجوه إن لم تفعلوا تكن فتنة في الأرض وفساد عريض or كبير. So this is manifested in these days. Like, yeah, you can get married until you make this much money, and like you said, you can't hold your natural urges. Subhanallah.
Can you translate the hadith for the audience?
Yeah, so we most of us know the first part of the hadith. If someone with good deen and character proposes, then marry them. Now, the second part that's not so much known is if you don't do that, then there's going to be great corruption in the world. And this is a corruption we're seeing.
Yeah, I grew up in Pakistan, and in Pakistan, one of the problems that is very common, unfortunately, is child sexual abuse and molestation, right? And I think the marital barriers is part of the issue that contributes to this problem. Like, I remember when I was growing up, the people in my family, uncles and others, when they got married, they were in their 30s. So the norm was in your 30s, 35 is like the marriage age. It wasn't early. So, at that time, even now, if you go back to Pakistan, I can speak for that, and I can't speak for other places, is that they, the typical like marriage age is like 30, 32. That's not a very healthy age, right? Yeah. So before they didn't have pornography, and, the sexual frustration and all that was coming out, unfortunately, on children, which is even more damaging than pornography, because pornography, you're damaging yourself. Through sexual abuse, you're damaging other people, and ruining their lives. So I think now it's, slightly better, but now what's happened is shifted towards pornography, right? So if you look at the data from Google, for example, you'll see one of the biggest consumers of pornography would be some of these Muslim countries, including India, Pakistan, India, where marriage has become, so it's so difficult to get married that, these people end up engaging in pornography.
Subhanallah. In Jordan, it's not that different, not in terms of pornography consumption. I have no idea about that. But the average age of marriage, it's like very normal, 30, 31, 35. Subhanallah, it's so strange how that became the normal.
In Jordan, is it because of the same reasons, like financial expectations?
Yes, financial expectations. The cost of living is very high, all of that. Yeah. Subhanallah.
Yeah.
Well, if someone's listening to us right now and they're struggling with this problem, what is one thing you can say to them?
I mean, the first thing is you're not alone. I think this isn't a problem that only you have, and and you don't. It doesn't have to be a problem that you deal with alone. Doesn't mean you make it public and you go out and announce it to the world. But maybe finding someone who you think can be helpful. You'll be surprised. Sometimes I had one client who was struggling, and he reached out to one of his friends who was also struggling. So then they became kind of like these partners in this struggle. Where they kept an eye on each other, like having someone in Alcoholics Anonymous. They have this thing called sponsor, right? So someone that you can call if you have this urge to drink. So for this person, he became almost like his sponsor, someone who was helping him, and they both kind of helped each other. So trusting someone with this, ideally someone who's mature enough, who can help you through this problem, instead of put you down too much. And then professional support, right? I mean, online therapy, even if you do something, that's just text-based online, it's still better than nothing. But ideally, someone who's professional. I think doing some self-reflection as to where the problem is coming from. Sometimes the problem is this purely behavioral issue. It's just something that you overlearned behavior, right? Habit. You habituated into it. Slowly just kind of became that way. Oftentimes, the problem is different. The problem is there's anxiety, there's depression. Maybe there could be some childhood trauma issue that you're not aware of. So getting professional help can be very, very, very beneficial. And there are programs out there that are free online. You can YouTube. There's things out there. There's lectures you can watch. There are there's a website. What is it? Lower Your Gaze or something. You know what I'm talking about? There's a website that helps.
The Instagram.
Yeah.
Purify Your Gaze, I think.
Purify Your Gaze, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's a Muslim-owned thing, but they also partner you up with someone, and so there's programs out there that can be very helpful. But don't let it be like if you have a thought that this is not that big of a problem, but that's a thought from shaitan. That's a waswas from shaitan, because even if, like I said earlier, even for us to be able to want to look at women's, or for me as a man, for another woman online with any kind of lustful intention, whether she's covered or not covered, that in itself is a problem right there. So from that moment on, it's a problem. So don't think that, just because there's some people who are doing it 4 hours a day, I'm not doing it that much, or I could have been committing zina. No, all that is just nonsense that shaitan is putting in your mind to justify and to keep the behavior going.
Wow. So like a consistent small sin becomes a big sin, like becomes a kabira.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Subhanallah.
Absolutely.
Subhanallah.
Mm-hmm.
And do you work with like individuals, or you're fully dedicated to teaching right now?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have time or capacity, but I know Khalil Center. That's my organization, that we have people that are available to offer services. But I supervise them, and most of my time is spent teaching or just managing the clients that I've had for many, many years now.
Okay, inshallah. We will link to that in the description.
Can you expand a little bit on the workbook that you mentioned before, like how once it's done, how people can get a hold of that, and a little bit about like how it can help people?
Yeah, so basically we have this contract with Clarita's book. So if you go on Khalil Center's website, khalilcenter.com, but if you Google it, we've done a series of workbooks. Our first workbook was on OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, especially scrupulosity, like waswasa type that people have. Our second workbook was on generalized anxiety disorder, or just generalized anxiety. And then our third one was on parenting. So we're doing a series of workbooks. And this is for people who want to help themselves and they don't have access to. And especially in this case, they feel really ashamed. So, the one I'm working on now is on pornography. So I'm just going through a few revisions. So it might take a couple of weeks, but then obviously it'll take time to publish, inshallah. So the plan is hopefully within the next 3 to 6 months, we'll have something announced, but it's almost done, you can say. But yeah, I think the goal was, again, I've been wanting to do this for a long time, but the goal is to for people who are struggling, for them to have some kind of support. And once it's published, then hopefully we can disseminate it, and if possible, even hopefully someone can sponsor and we can make it free, because it's such a huge problem that I think there's a big need in the Muslim community. And in this workbook, so I teach and we train individuals on this model of psychotherapy called TIIP, Traditional Islamically Integrated Psychotherapy Model. And like I mentioned before, it conceptualizes a human being from aqal, nafs, ruh, their ihsas, emotions. So the approach in the book is also very similar. In all of our workbooks, the approach is very similar. So recognizing where the issue is and then how to tackle it, in this kind of a multiplex manner is what we do.
Very nice. We were just listening before the interview to you talking about the difference between Western psychology and Islamic psychology. It's Yeah, it's great. It's great to
And if
which, by the way, nafs, the issue of nafs is the biggest difference between one of the biggest differences, right? Because in Western psychology, pornography is sometimes considered healthy. Masturbation, pornography,
really?
there's some couple counselors who actually, if the husband and wife are struggling with intimacy, they'll say, look at pornography together, watch pornography together. It'll help you. Because they don't have this sense of like the nafs is bad, and if it's not inherently bad, but it has a tendency to engage in something bad, and if you don't control it, so a little bit is not okay, right? Especially if it's something that's as bad as pornography. Even a little bit is considered bad. But from a Western psychology perspective, it only becomes bad if you're not productive, if you're not making money, if you're a burden on society. But Islam doesn't, see human value based on their material value.
Wow, that's crazy. It's scary going to a Muslim person going to a non-Muslim psychologist. Like, you don't know what they're going to tell you.
Yeah, that's another topic for another podcast.
Inshallah.
So if anybody wants to benefit from your work or your content, can you share your Instagram handle or any other ways we can follow you?
Yeah. So I wish I could be more benefit to people. You can Google me, but I think organizations like I mentioned Khalil Center. So go to khalilcenter.com. And I think through that, you'll find people. And most therapists have some level of training and obviously awareness about pornography. So even if they're not, ideally, if you find someone who's a licensed sex addiction therapist or a certified sex CSAT, they call it, that's good. But even if you can't find one, and you find any therapist, you go in with intentionally with this issue, this problem, that I'm here to recover from this struggle, and start the work, and inshallah you'll see some benefit. So don't look for me, because I'm really not an expert. Alhamdulillah, I'm a psychologist, and I teach, and I've done as much as I can, but I don't want to put myself out there as some kind of expert who you should follow.
Okay, no problem. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you so much. This topic has been on our mind for, I don't know, maybe over 6 months now.
Yeah.
But we just couldn't find the right person to tackle it. So I'm very happy we finally got to talk about it. And to our beautiful listeners, you heard, if you're struggling, you're not alone. Just seek help, and inshallah help will come. Thank you so much. Again, we really appreciate taking the time to speak with us. And our listeners, inshallah, will see you in the next episode.
All right.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum.